Hello and welcome to another MicroCloud video. We have deployed MicroCloud, we have authenticated and logged in into the UI, and now I'm going to be showing you what are some of the things that you can do in the UI. This is not meant to be an exhaustive video showcasing you every single thing that you can do, but rather just provide you with an overview so that you can start your MicroCloud journey. Once you log in, this is the window that you will see. It looks pretty standard to any other user interface. It has your options on the left and then your context to the right. And so once you're working with your options, the things that you can do will show here. On the top here, you'll see that you are placed in the default project. Projects are top-level concept in MicroCloud and the best way that you can organize your workloads. You can define a project for a specific purpose, or in a multi-tenant environment, you can define a project for a specific team or a team member, and therefore isolate things that are happening within the project from each other. Let's go ahead and create a new project for the purpose of this video. If we go ahead and create a new project here, you will be able to add a description for this project. You will be able to define which storage pool instances in this project should use, which network they should use. You would also be able to set up certain resource limits. So for example, a maximum number of instances that can be launched in this project. And again, this can be quite useful for multi-tenant environments so that you can make sure that your resources are evenly distributed and that your team members cannot overuse your resources and not allow any for their colleagues. For now, I will just create it with the default options. And once we create a project, we can see that we are now placed in that project. So let's go ahead and create some instances as well. So as you can see here, you again have a variety of options, but for the base image, you have three main options. First one is to browse images from our own image library. You can also use a custom ISO. So for example, this would be an option that you would use if you wanted to launch a Windows virtual machine. And you can also upload an instance file, meaning that if you have an existing hypervisor somewhere, you can export EMDK file or a QCOW2 file and then upload it through here in order to import that instance into MicroCloud. For now, we will just be launching an instance from our image library. Once you access it, you will see that we offer quite a lot of different images. Of course, on the top, there is a variety of Ubuntu images, but then if you scroll down, you will be able to see images for a variety of other Linux distributions, which are provided here for your convenience. I will go ahead and just select Ubuntu 2404. And then when I go back here, I can choose certain properties for this specific instance. I can choose whether I want it to be a container or a virtual machine. I will keep it as container because it's small and it will be fast to launch. You can select a cluster group if you have defined any cluster groups. You can also specify a specific cluster member if you want to do that. Or you can just select any and allow MicroCloud to place your instance where it sees fit. And you can also apply a profile, and I will talk about profiles in a second. You can also specify a variety of configuration options, disks, networks, security policies, etc. For now, I'm just going to launch an instance by default. As you can see, the creation has now begun. It is downloading the image from the image server and then using it to create an instance. Given that it's a container, as I mentioned, it is quite fast. And if we go ahead here, we can click here and then inspect this instance. If you scroll down here, you will see the usage that this instance has. And then on the bottom, you can see which networks, these devices and profiles this instance is using. If you go to configuration tab, you are able to change the configuration. These are the same options that you could change as you were launching this instance. You can define your snapshots. You can access the terminal directly from the UI. So basically, this is equivalent of SSHing into this instance. You can access the console. And then if you want to inspect something that went wrong, you can access the logs as well. On the top here, again, you have typical options. I would say you can see that your instance is running. So you cannot use the option to start this instance because it's already running. But you can restart it, you can pause it or freeze it, and you can stop this instance. Here you have additional options. So you can migrate this instance. And if you click here, you will see that you can migrate it to a different cluster member, that you can move its root storage to a different pool or move instance to a different project. If this instance was stopped, you would be able to create an image out of it and then use that image to launch other instances. You can also copy it, export it, and also if it was stopped, you would be able to delete it. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about profiles. Now, profiles are very useful because they're essentially configuration templates, which means that you can define a profile with certain properties, and then when you're launching your instance, instead of configuring properties on a per instance basis, you can just apply the profile and it will apply all these configurations. So, for example, let's go ahead and create a profile that will allow us to launch desktop with virtual machines. Desktop virtual machines are typically larger because, again, it's a desktop environment and it has this graphical component. So they typically need a bit more resources. So in order to launch a desktop VM, it is recommended that you increase the resource limits. Because as you can see, by default, the CPU limit is kept quite low, so we can increase it and allow it to utilize all the CPU cores. And similarly, the memory limit by default is 1 gigabit, but we can do 4 instead, so that it's more suitable for desktop VMs. Once we create this project, it will be here. And then if we go back and try to launch a desktop VM, we will be able to apply this profile. So if I go to browse images, I can choose a desktop variant. And if I select regular desktop, you will see Ubuntu. If you select GNOME, you will see Arch. And then we also offer OpenSUSE. So I will go back and select the Questing Polka, which is the newest Ubuntu desktop release. And then here, I will actually select the desktop VM profile. So once I select it, as you can see here, it doesn't have a root storage because we haven't defined it in the profile, but I can do that and select remote. But then if I go to resource limits, you will see that it has inherited what I have defined in the default profile. So if I go create and start, it will start to create its instance. This will take a while because, again, desktop images are quite large. So we can go ahead and look at some other things as this instance is getting launched. So let's talk a little bit about networking. If you click here, you can expand on what the networking tab has. It gives you an overview of your networks, and you can see what is the type of that network. We support physical, oven, and bridge networks. You can also see whether it's a managed network or not, and then also whether it applies to the entire cluster or it's member specific. If you click on a network, so let's, for example, select the default one, you will be able to inspect it and see what is the applicant network it might be connected to, what instances are using it, and what projects are using this default network. And then if you scroll down, you will be able to see its properties and also potentially edit them. So for example, if you want to edit the MTU, you can click on pencil and just change it, but I won't be making any changes right now. You can also define network forwards directly from the UI, and you can see that there are a few that we have defined on the default network. You can also see network leases, and there is one that is shown here. You can also define ACL. So if you go to create an ACL, you would be able to add ingress rules. Let's do it like this so I can show you an egress rules and therefore define who can have access to that. I won't be defining that now. And also if you go to the IPM window, you will be able to see all of your IP addresses and who is using them and for what purpose. If you go to the storage, you can similarly inspect your options on the storage level. You will be able to see your storage pools. And if you remember when we were creating the MicroCloud, we set up both local and remote storage. And you can see here that each cluster member has its own local storage, and then we have a remote cluster that is accessible to everyone. If you go to volumes, you will be able to see the volumes that are currently being used within this project. And that is our container and the image that was used to create this container. The creation of the desktop VM is still in progress, but once it is created, you would be able to see it here as well. And you can also, for example, create custom volumes that you can then attach to your VMs if they need more disks. So for example, we can call this new volume, give it the size 50, type block and create it, and then we can later use it to attach it to a VM. If we go to customizers, so this is something that I mentioned, that you can import customizers that you want to use to create your virtual machines. This is something you would do if you wanted to launch a Windows machine. And we also support storage buckets, so you can define storage buckets directly here in the UI. If you go to images, we will see two images here that we have used so far, one to launch a container and the other to launch a VM. The good thing is that now, since these images have been used, they are available locally. So if we want to launch instances from the same type, we don't need to download these images again. They're available, and then we can launch an instance much quicker. If we go back here, we can see that the download was finished, and it's now creating this instance from image, and it's unpacking it, which again takes a bit of time because this is a desktop image, but this VM should be available in a moment. If you go to the configuration, this is just the project configuration. So this is what we defined when we're setting the project, and you can of course adjust it and change it. Other options here, if you go to clustering, you would be able to see your cluster members. And as you can see, we have 3 cluster members. They're all online. And for example, you could do things like an evacuate cluster member through here. So for example, if you go to maintenance or something like that, you can evacuate it. It will then allow you to choose whether you want to move on or migrate. For example, I won't do it, but I can show you. You can stop your instances. You can migrate them to other members or live migrate them to other members. And then once you have done your maintenance, you can then use this play button to just restore this cluster member. You can also define cluster groups that I mentioned when I was launching an instance. We don't have any here, but you can do that. On the operations side, if there are any ongoing operations, you're able to see them here. Similarly for the warnings, these are some of the warnings that I had some days before. And then on the permission side, you will be able to define, to see the identities. So people or clients that have logged into this UI, you will be able to define groups. So for example, as you can see, I have a few testing groups. And then you will be able to assign identities and permissions that this group can have, and therefore have a very fine-grained access control. And if you're using an IDC provider, as I have shown you in the previous video, you can also have IDP group mappings. So for example, if you define your groups on the level of your IDC provider, you can then use those groups here. Finally, here you have settings. This is just kind of general settings that you can set on a cluster member, on a cluster level. It has a lot of different configuration keys. And this is also where you can choose whether you want dark mode, light mode. And as you can see, I have system here because I prefer the dark mode. So this is what gets set up by default. Now to finish off, let's go back and let's actually access our desktop VM, which has finally been launched. The cool thing about here, because it's a desktop VM, we can go ahead to the console and it will actually load the graphic console here. And you can interact with it as you would with any kind of desktop instance. So if you go here, we can click next and finish. And you can see that I can actually interact with it as I would with any Ubuntu system. So this can be useful if you want to just try a new Ubuntu version or install some applications in a sandboxed environment in order to test. Now, again, this was just meant to be a very brief overview of the UI. I hope that it was useful and that it showed you some of the main options. Do take it for a spin and try it for yourself. Keep an eye on the new things that we are continuously adding in the UI. Thank you again for watching and see you in the next video.